Now we will start the second keynote speech with Mr. Riyaz Jivanjee. I would like first to introduce Mr. Riyaz. Mr. Riyaz is an award-winning leadership and corporate development advisor. He's an executive coach, and we are proud to have him today. His focus is on business results and organizational individual peak performance through stakeholder-centered impact. Mr. Riyaz has over 24 years of experience in advising and managing, facilitating, coaching Fortune 1000 international joint ventures, private equity, and government and family businesses. And he has over 11 years in strategy consulting, multinational business management, and international business development. Mr. Riyaz is presenting to us in his session the leadership resilience coaching critical rules to safeguard business results and return on capital employed. Mr. Riyaz, you are now ready to start your session. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Riyaz? Yeah, here you go. You have the microphone and you can also start sharing from your end.
Okay, I'm just uploading and we'll share. So, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. It's actually very close to my topic, working in a VUCA world. Today, when we start here. Okay, let's get this going. Okay, so thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'll go straight into it. My topic today is resilient leadership, coaching critical roles to safeguard business results in a VUCA world. Who I am? Well, as Shema just said, I have been working in the GCC on and off for the last 13 years. I raised the hand, one moment. Oh, he's gone. I apologize, we've had serious latency issues here with the lockdown in Riyadh. And I think I'm back. So, to cut a long story short, my background has been advising, managing, facilitating, and coaching Fortune 1000 companies, high net worths. So 11 years in strategy consultancy, but the last 13 years which is most pertinent to this topic. I've been working in talent development and cultural transformation, aligned to strategy execution. Now, Samir did a wonderful job talking about coaching from an ICF perspective, and so much of what's going on the ground, I understand, for so many of you in your organizations. I have, over the last 20 years, been coaching. I started off life in the UK and then came to Bahrain, 2003. So I picked up many qualifications over the way. Most of my coaching has been under the Institute of Coaching, but about 4 years ago, I too joined the ICF, and I think the initiatives they have done have just been wonderful. So my focus is this. I work with large companies, government and multinationals going through change. And this is the scope that I'm going to bring to this presentation, which I think will complement what you already heard from Samira quite well. I describe myself as, in terms of this audience, as a professional relationship coach, focusing on helping leaders have gravitas, which is basically influence, communication, and agility. I'm really pleased to be here in spite of the technical issues. So why resilient leadership? And what is it? Why are we talking about this? 3 points. Business continuity. By that I mean succession planning, keeping businesses working effectively, business results, and individual career development. This is really why senior leaders look to coaching, to leadership programs, and why boards have them doing it, versus what they do already relatively well or well every day in business as usual management. I'll start this properly now with a quote. Fear touches us all at times like this, and it does not serve us to deny or try to push it away with stimulants, distractions, or acting out. On the contrary, what is restorative is simply to embrace, recognize, and accept fear as a natural human emotion, not good or bad, but a normal, usually temporary response to a lack of control. So today we're going to be talking about uncertainty, the world and what's going on as a context, resilient leadership, and how important it has been with our experience dealing with these senior roles of having the right sponsor. Talking about the return on capital employed from their perspective, but really having skin in the game so they can support both the coaching and the success of the coaching over the long run. So let's start with uncertainty. This is a quote by Benjamin Franklin. In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. Growing up, that was always a joke, but there's a lot of truth to that. A lot of why we find the world so scary at times is because we have the illusion. We assume that things are relatively certain. It's a human condition. We make patterns, we assume things will happen, we become habitual, we make habits. In reality, that's far from the truth. We never know what's going to happen. Things can change all the time. And this is completely aligned, to most of our religious practices. We don't know how long we're going to be here. We don't know what's going to happen. And also to business. Now, what is this word VUCA? I think many of you have probably heard of it. But how do you manage where change is so rapid and unprecedented? And it really, really, really is these days. I mean, even before this crisis, we were up against massive digital disruption. And most companies have spent an awful lot of money trying to change, but very little has happened. If I define this, volatile, change is often violent and uncontrollable. Well, we've seen that with the pandemic. Uncertain, the future is unpredictable, making it hard to prepare for change. Leaders are also seeing this a lot, particularly when it comes to things like digitization, new competitors coming in, clients and old customers demanding different ways to be served. Complex. It seems that things are getting much more chaotic and confused. You really feel that almost everywhere in life. You're connected all the time, and now your home life and your work life collide. With remote digital working, this has become even more apparent. Ambiguity, a lack of clarity, because it's hard to know what the root cause of the problem really is. So, with so much going on, things can often feel confusing. And VUCA ecosystems can be very, very dangerous and disruptive places. So what are the fixes for this? The volatility, when it comes to coaching leaders, it's helping them to use a vision. Create a compelling vision, which they can use for values for their people. With uncertainty, real understanding. This means doing research, helping them to think about what their competitors are doing, look at what's new in the industry, and anticipate threats and opportunities and what they can do about it. Complexity, well, clarity. Crystal clear communication, promoting teamwork and collaboration, clear direction, and encouraging solving problems together. And of course, ambiguity. For this, agility. Leaders remain adaptable even during uncertain times, encouraging learning new skills and stimulating debate. And creativity. Now, resilient coaching in these uncertain times. What are the characteristics of resilience? Think about what's going on right now. I'll just throw some things out there. The environment. Cybersecurity is causing all sorts of problems, and cyber insecurity. We have remote digital working. New businesses are growing very, very fast. And often they're self-funding, which is changing our whole ecosystems. We have huge customer bases in audiences and tournaments, for example, in gaming, where so many of our youth and 30s and 40-year-olds spend so much of their time are self-funding. So what do we get our leaders to do? Around the world now, with the COVID virus, people and education has gone online. And this is causing massive mental, physical challenges for people. Work in education may never, ever be the same again. And already in the last 7 years, the average lifespan for a Fortune 500 company, compared to 40 years ago, has moved from 30, 40 years to about 3, they say, for new companies. So, I am very sorry.
Sorry,
Hi,
Coach Riyaz. Coach Riyaz, can I just
yes.
turn off the phone and you keep muting yourself. So I unmuted you. I'll take care of the chat from my end. You can proceed going back to one slide and explaining it one more time, please.
Great, got it. Thank you. So let's just go back to. We talked about the VUCA world, the characteristics of change that are happening, and the massive change that's overcoming all of us in so many ways. And I apologize if I'm repeating this for some of you, but I realize a lot of this is broken up. Remote digital working. This, on the one hand, has been wonderful for many people, and they're thriving. But for many, this has caused isolation. And for businesses, again, for the ones that are ready, this has been an amazing way to take leaps into the unknown and have success. We've seen call centers working remotely now, where management never would have let them, and it's working well. But we've also seen so many government departments over the last weeks suffering because they're just not ready. They haven't had the right training, they haven't had the right infrastructure, they don't have things like VPNs and things that work, and they can't do work. I know people who are going into the ministries and still having to do things manually once a week just to process. Gold is at an all-time high, almost. The bond markets are down to practically nothing, and online education, well, that may become the norm. That may become the norm for many people. There's a lot missing, but things are changing so much. The latest news about this virus is perhaps we'll have a situation until December, January. That's not what we're saying publicly, but that's what the schools are planning for, at least some of them that we're talking to. So, resilient coaching in this uncertain time. I think the characteristics of resilience, at least for this presentation, are how do you help people, our senior leaders, have peak performance skills, both in business or as a business, but as individuals as well. And the key to this from our experience, because most of the things that we're talking about are simply coming from the experience of the 7 or 8 companies that we've worked with over the last 7 years. Championing, actually getting buy-in by the people who put the money into the programs and into the business, and have to look at continuity, getting senior management to be able to help their people, to be able to lead the business as things are changing. And also sometimes just to have new habits, completely new habits, not referring to the past in terms of what decisions they make, where they go, what they'll do. One of the things we talked about in the title for this presentation was safeguarding return on capital employed and business concerns. So I'm going to recap some of this because I think we may have broken up. But a lot of what we found has worked has been bringing in the stakeholders as much as possible, the senior leaders, for 2 reasons. One, it helps to actually get the business sponsors to understand what's going on, and for the business sponsors in turn to then actively care, because they have risk, they have skin in the game, they need the business results to actually happen. So if money and time and energy is being spent on leadership development resilience, on programs of change, and I'm calling here everything programs which aren't business as usual and aren't under somebody who's running that business. So programs of change with, to put it simplistically, training, aspects of training, followed by coaching around mindset, around change, around helping people to take new decisions, and around really reacting much more rapidly than they have in the past, particularly in government and big organizations where that isn't the norm. I've put this up because this is a piece of research from Deloitte, but it illustrates the point really well. Trainers, so often that we've worked with and seen are great. However, the programs that they're often put on just don't make the impact because there's no follow-up. The business does these things piecemeal, and there's no structure. Championing is probably the one piece that's missing. And one of the biggest lessons that we've learned is that often it needs to be bigger than HR. I mean, HR is critical, but if you don't have an SVP, if you don't have the CEO really actively championing these things and making it okay to take risks, to say, okay, you're being coached. These are the results that you're trying to get. Tell me what's going on. Tell me what's not working. And as a coach or as a program lead, helping for those questions to come up and to happen and to be answered, then very little happens. Now, what I've really promised at the beginning of the, the presentation, if I could be heard, was that this wouldn't be lots of theory, with some context, but really we'd talk about some cases and then spend as much time as possible, hopefully with good audio, asking questions and getting your responses and trying to help to share the lessons that we've learned. So I'll give you some used cases. Firstly, I had a new VP, and I did the coaching myself for this person, for a Fortune 500 tech company. This was back in 2019, so beginning of last year. He'd had a coach assigned to him, and for whatever reason, he didn't say, and I had no desire to know, it hadn't worked. And he really didn't want to waste any time looking at coaching. But we met, and he said to me, this is going to be a waste of time. Why are we doing this? And I said, well, perhaps it will be a waste of time. It's really down to you. But you're here, the company's spending a lot of money. What are we going to do to make at least this hour valuable? And he smiled and said, if this isn't valuable, do I have to do this again? And I said, well, it's up to you. You don't want to? Don't. If the company says we have to tick the box, we'll deal with that together. But you have my word, I won't waste your time any further. So this guy was very hardworking, very smart, very type A, driven. And it was obvious from his interaction, his on the outside aggression. But we spoke. I said, let's do something useful. You're an engineer, you're very mindset driven about getting results. Let's do something very simple. And we just did a simple wheel of life and got him to get present to what areas of his life were working and what were not. Simple exercise for coaches and trainers to do. But for this guy who found most of these things a waste of time, he smiled and said, great, I can do that. There's something to do. It took him a couple of minutes. And he came back with work and career as an 11 out of 10, and everything else is a 1, 2, 3, 4, really low. So I said to him, I don't get this. I've never seen somebody who's as open and honest and direct as you to be quite so out of balance and be happy with it. And he smiled and said, look, I know I'm putting religion, spirituality, family, all the areas that we talked about at the 1, 2, 3. But right now, I'm focused on getting that next role. I want to be CEO of the company. Can you help me with that? I said, well, perhaps. I don't know. But let's work for this hour and let's see what we can do. I said, okay. So, cut a long story short, I said to him, do you think you're the front runner for this role? He said, that's a good question. No, I don't think I am. I think there's another guy, he's great, and he's probably the front runner. Can you help me to change that? And again, I said, we'll see. I think I can help you to put your best foot forward. And then randomly, as often happens in these cases when you open somebody up to just talk, but it happens, he had a text came in, and he said,
Now, Coach Riyaz, may I ask you to come closer to the microphone and just clarify the last point one more time? We're receiving some comments. So come closer to the microphone.
I'm sorry.
There we go.
Latency. Let me just, is that better?
Yes, better.
Okay. I'm now the human antenna holding the screen. Okay, so we had this VP, very type A, very driven, worked 15 hours a day, pushed his people, all this sort of stuff came out. Then in the middle of the first coaching call, actually was face-to-face, he gets a text from his son. And he said, I'm sorry, it's got a text in. And he said, well, I've got a problem. He doesn't want to talk to me. He got a B. And I didn't understand what he said. I said, what do you mean he got a B? And he said to me, well, my son's scared to speak to me because he didn't get an A. And I said, wow, let me take a step out of this. This is meant to be business coaching. You're very clear you want to talk about how you make the CEO position for this business unit. But we're about the same age, or perhaps you're a decade younger than me, I'm not sure. But how often do you tell your son that you love him? And he looked at me and said, why are you asking me questions like that? And I don't do things like that. We don't speak like that. And I said, well, you're a very smart man, and just bear with me for this hour. If you can generate the courage and the usefulness for yourself in your life, to take care of your relationship with your child now, and actually connect with him so that you don't lose it. Because I'm sure under all that heat and bravado, you're a nice guy and you're a decent guy. And he smiled. I said, but you're just driven and you push everything aside. And that boy will grow up and he won't be close to you, and he may be frightened of you and he may respect you, but you won't have that close connection. And he looked at me and said, you know, no one's ever said that to me before. And I said to him, well, if you can generate what it takes to do that, you know, you tell someone once he's dumb or stupid, he believes you. To counteract that, you've got to tell him 100 times or 1,000 times how great he is, how you love him, how clever he is, how pretty he is. And he had a tear in his eye. And he said, look, Riyaz, no one ever makes me cry. Why are we having this kind of a conversation? And I said, well, it's not exactly coaching, but it is going to forward you stepping up in your life and doing something. And I said, look, I don't know exactly what it's going to take. You have a competitor for your business goal who you say is great. And I know him, and he probably is great. But if you're going to put your best foot forward, you need to start pushing yourself in different ways and not just working hard and being driven. This example was interesting because, you know, credit to this guy, we didn't meet that much. We just spoke and had online coaching whenever he felt like it. Probably once or twice a month. We talk for 10, 20 minutes and you get straight to the point, and I'll ask him a few coaching style questions. But to his credit, he really went for healing this relationship with his son and his other children, and his wife, who he basically never saw, always working. And over the course of 6 months, he started to generate real joy from this and gain some balance. He didn't get the CEO position in the first round at the end of that year, but strangely enough, another one came up a year later, or 7 months later, and he was the front runner for that and did get it. So coaching senior people, we're talking about return on capital employed, why we do this. One of the things I think that has made a big difference is to treat everybody as a sponsor, and to be very clear, there's no compulsion in coaching, because at this level, if they don't care, it's absolutely pointless. But having said that, being very direct and trying to help people from the beginning to actually uncover new opportunities for growth, to get their resilience so that they can actually be ready to make a difference in the areas of life that are important, whether they see it or not. Giving them that opportunity can be gold. And I think it's awareness and choice. Awareness and choice. That, I think, is probably one of the biggest lessons that we've learned from dealing with so many senior people. And senior people in Saudi Arabia as well. Another executive said to me, as a Saudi man, he was actually a young man, said, we don't tell people we love them. And I laughed and said, well, there's two fixed mindsets here. There's two fixed perspectives. One, you're speaking for your whole country and you're assuming that's the way. And there's no such thing as a Saudi man, there's a man. And there's an opportunity. And what you do with it is down to you. Again, it seems a lot of people don't have these conversations. I'm clear that the audience I'm talking to now are L&D people, people who are well-versed or actually delivering training or coaching. And for us, this might be second nature. Doesn't mean our lives are perfect at all, but to think like this is second nature. But for many people, these simple truths, particularly in the backgrounds that I've come from and people I'm working with, it's almost rocket science. So I want to say that because I think that's a surprise to many people. Now, a completely different track. Another example, an international retail network, again based in Saudi Arabia, which is where I'm now based. We designed a program. The mandate was they had some senior people, but they were low performing. Their outlets were very low performing and had been for a while. And it was clear from everything that everybody said, the input, interviews, that people were just low energy, were jaded. They didn't feel that anything they would do was worth doing. Didn't exactly know why. Everybody had opinions. But by designing a program where we actually got the stakeholders, the board of directors, to give these people a chance to have some training and then get coached on the job, and in between go back into their business and be the coach of their own teams. And for us to be the coach's coach, if you like, and a mentor and an aid to help them with motivation and with dealing with problems as they came up. I think the biggest surprise here was that we had a board director say that 60% of these low performing outlets actually increased their performance by 20 or 30% within the first 6 months of the program. What was interesting here, and I think is a takeaway, is it's key to pick who you're going to be coaching. That doesn't mean you discard people, but to know from the offset that you're dealing with people who know how to perform. That's a big lever. But really, are they up for change? Because we all know you can't change people who don't want to change. It's like tell your children 100 times don't eat sweets. It makes no difference. However, if you educate them and you do what it takes, behavioral change can happen. Another real case. Let's talk about the case number 4, actually. Leadership turning around culture. We had an integrated program, a massive, the biggest telecom company in the Middle East. A few years ago, according to all the metrics, in terms of culture, in terms of employee motivation, wasn't doing that well. Making lots of money because it's the incumbent telecom company, meaning that it had a monopoly basically, But that was going to change. That is changing. We had huge competition coming in, and different, not just from telecoms, but from all the technology that was happening. So the market was going to erode, not in 1 year, but within 5 or 10, so that people would no longer have to go to them. And that was the imperative from the government. So in tandem with McKinsey, we designed a leadership development program that involved, again, training, but more than that, involved real mindset coaching, really helping to loosen up the leaders and to get them to see that they could actually make a difference. The biggest lesson learned from this was that the shift for culture actually came from getting people to collaborate where people had always worked in silos, and for many good reasons, but had always worked in silos. And there was a culture where often some of these silos, people didn't even talk to their management very often. But really loosening these people up and getting to look at, how do you look at decision making? How do you incorporate people into decision making? How do you actually engage your teams and keep that happening, as a practice again and again and again? And how do you stop worrying about being perfect and being seen that way? So you're no longer doing that. You're actually helping to steward lots of the smart people that are coming in to make the decisions with you. You're accountable, they're responsible. Now again, when we talk about things like this, it sounds very simple, but a big lesson learned here has been how important it is to have leadership development to build resilience. Because everything else that you do, in the end, doesn't make a difference if your people aren't transformed. Another massive chemical company, an example that's very much linked to this, went through a very big transformation program 9 years ago. And I won't go into the details of it because it's irrelevant, but here's what's interesting. Millions and millions of dollars spent on change management. A lot of money and time and effort and brains spent on improving the infrastructure. But last year, we're looking at some of the things that are happening there. You find that their billing systems and logistics systems have all these new things in place, but their people are still using an Excel spreadsheet, and then they're getting a secretary or an assistant to plug in the things into the new system. So no change has really happened. And leadership at the top, no comment about that. Ignoring it, it's business as usual. I've seen a lot of these things work and not work. But I think the biggest lessons learned here are always need sponsorship from the top if you're going to start here. Now, one of the questions that I think is very interesting for an audience like us is to say, should resilience develop? Should its coaching, training, should it be focused at the top of businesses? Or is it the other way around? Should it start at the bottom? Or even the people in the middle, the section managers, the people with all the trouble being squashed at both ends. Should we start there? Intuitively, I think it's the middle, if you have to say things out of context. But going wherever the client wants, in the end, it's about making a difference quickly, making impact there, so you can start the cascade when it's up, down, left or right. These are some of the cases that I just wanted to bring up. I think, given all the breaks and the problems we've had with connectivity, I think we should go straight to some Q&A so that I can actually talk to you in detail about things that are useful to you.
Thank you, Mr. Riyaz, for your presentation. Statement as mentioned, key coaching First question is saying, what is return on capital employed? Lessons learned, safeguarding return on capital employed concerns. So we'll go with this question as the first question.
Great question. Thank you for asking it, because if that wasn't clear, then that needs to be clarified for everybody. So thank you for asking. So the point here of return on capital employed was effectively, you know and I know that to make change happen, you need senior sponsors. Ideally, you want the CEO at an operational level championing the program by being at events, by actually having an interest in the group work that happens, by being there as one of the stakeholders as frequently as is humanly possible, and being seen to really care for the results. So when you want to make a CEO a sponsor, one of the things that CEOs are most charged with is actually dealing with their board of directors, i.e. the people who represent their shareholders. And most of the things that shareholders care about is their financial return. When the shareholders, the government, they also care about other things, of course, like impact on the country, what change are you making for the people. But none of that matters if you're not making the returns that they require for their money. So return on capital employed, or looking at where can you link the focus of the individual development plans and the coaching for senior people to the strategic goals of the business in a really tangible way. I don't mean dictating to them, but create that as a context, and then from there, co-create with the sponsor or the sponsor's representatives, the coachee, and yourself, goals that are really going to move that needle. That's one of the key ways to actually keep sponsors there, because they have skin in the game. Because then they have to care about what happens, whether they like the idea of coaching or any other initiatives or not. If they don't, it's a risk for them and their stewardship of the company. Does that answer the question? Was that what you're asking?
I hope it satisfies the person who has asked the question. We have another question which says, from your experience, Mr. Riyaz, senior coaching depends on one coach trusting in himself. So what to make sure is there? You want me to repeat the question?
Actually, yes. Or I heard the question actually. Whoever asked it can clarify if I'm missing the point. But if the point of the question is it's down to one coach and the relationship with one coach, well, that's a great point, because, and I'm sorry if I didn't explain it earlier with the choppy mic. With senior executive coaching, at the end of the day, chemistry is everything. Chemistry and credibility, because you have to create trust. If you don't create trust with the client, nothing happens. Again, I think that's the case. It is the case, of course, we know, with all coaching. But with senior people, they're not used to opening up to discuss these things in business. They have no desire to quite often, and they're busy. Also, there's a risk from their perspective. There's suspicion, there's a risk. So that chemistry with a coach is critical. Chemistry is an interesting word. If we break that down, what we're really talking about is, one, trust and credibility. But it's a circle, right? You can't have trust before you get to know someone. But you can know their track record. So what we've found in various organizations, that's interesting, is that clients go for one of two things. Either they go for somebody who has very deep academic grounding, maybe a PhD in leadership, you know, with some very good experience internationally. Or increasingly, they go for somebody with a strong business background who then has solid coaching on top. That seems to be the two situations. The key, I think, if this is the question that you're asking, is do we give, as a body of coaches working in the GCC and program designers, do we give choice to people, or do we thrust somebody on them? And I think choice is always the answer. I've seen it work, I've seen it not work, but choice has to always be there. So you let these people at least speak to a couple of coaches and have no compulsion about it. If it doesn't work for them, pick somebody else. The truth is, you could have somebody who's incredibly good at what they do, who's very young, who doesn't have any credibility, but they could do a great job. But if they're not going to be given the chance, they're not going to be given the chance. So with senior people, it's about choice. Actually, I think a core lesson then is give as much choice to the client as possible. And don't be afraid to have them turn you down or to be turned down. Don't take it personally, don't think about it. I've had to deal with that with many of the companies who we've brought on, or the individuals that we've brought on as trainers, as coaches, as even on the program side. But it's not about us. It's not about us, and it's no reflection, usually, on performance. It's about them having a safe space and good chemistry, but a safe space where they can discuss something with somebody that they feel is somebody they can discuss things with. I was going to say with an equal, but with somebody that they feel safe with and they think can actually help them to move the needle.
Well answered. Actually, we are running out of time. We have only 3 minutes to go. And then I just would like to thank you at the end of the session for your great input and the case studies that you have shared with us. And I would like also to thank our first day of the and one coaching and a training forum. And then we will see you, inshallah, tomorrow at the same timing. Thank you, dear.
Thank you.